All right, good morning, everyone. Good morning, good morning. So first of all, welcome. I think it's been a very long time since we've done a morning shir. So Baruch Hashem, I figured summertime, although I don't know if for most adults it makes a difference if it's summertime or wintertime, but good. Hopefully it'll be a scheduling success, Emir Hashem. So first of all, we thank our annual Talmud Torah sponsor, the Tilson Mishpacha of Eretz Yisrael, for dedicating all the shiurim and drashos this year in the zechus, in the merit of Besoros Tovos, for all of Klal Yisrael. And of course, again, we always dedicate our learning in the merit of our precious hostages. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Emir Hashem, bring them home b'shalom and b'karav, and in the merit of our holy soldiers, may HaKadosh Baruch Hu allow them to be successful on the land, in the air, and in the sea. Emir Hashem, as Klal Yisrael fights this last stage of the war. And again, it's overwhelming to think that as we, Baruch Hashem, are able to be here today in our brand new shul, in our brand new base medrash, we must keep in mind that our brothers and sisters in Eretz Yisrael live under the constant threat and constant fear of the Iranian barrages. But as I mentioned a little bit last night, it's important for us to understand what a different time in Jewish history that we are living in. It's not a new thing that Jews go into hiding, right? Or it's not a new thing that Jews go into bunkers or Jews go into protected areas. But throughout our history, we were always scared to come out, not knowing who would be there, what would be there. And to think that we live in a time where we understand that although we have to seek shelter, in the face of immediate threat, but we know that when we come outside after the barrage is over, we come out into our homeland, which is protected by our army, under the providence of the Ribono Shel Olam, and that we as a people have the privilege to be able to fight and, God willing, to be successful and to vanquish the greatest state sponsor of terror in the world. And then Emir Hashem, when they will be defeated, which they will be defeated, the Iranian regime will collapse and victory will be ours. That victory will be delivered to humanity by the Jewish people. And it's an incredibly overwhelming and just special thing to contemplate, that we Am Yisrael, we are the tip of the spear in this incredible war against this dramatic global evil, and that we have no doubt about success. What only gives us a little bit of pause is kind of like what the path between where we are now and success. How many losses, how much tragedy, how much heartbreak will there be over the course of the journey? But we know where the journey ends, and the journey only ends in one place. And that is the success of Am Yisrael, the success of Medinas Yisrael, the success of our holy and precious army, incredible Siyata Dishmaya, the Ribbon Shalom choreographing and overseeing each and every one of these pivotal, seminal, seismic events. And Halabai, we should just be Zoch Emeret Hashem, that there should be no more losses, there should be no more heartbreak, there should be no more death and destruction for our people. We've known enough, not just since the start of this war, but we've known enough for the last 2,000 years. Halabai, we should be Zoch Emeret Hashem, to see bracha, to see simcha, to see shalom, and ultimately to see Mashiach, Mihira B'Yameinu. So we're going to Emir Hashem over the course, hopefully if this time frame works, and there are sheets, there should be, if everyone doesn't, there are sheets on the bima over here if anyone needs, or sheets up here if anyone needs. So Emir Hashem, we have 2 scheduled classes this week and next week. So really what I'd like to try to do is a little bit of a hybrid between the Tehillim and Emir Hashem, the Parsha. But this week I really wanted to focus a little bit more on the Parsha, because this week's Parsha Shlach contains the most traumatic episode in the history of our people. There are 2 major traumatic episodes, right? What are the 2 major traumatic episodes for Klal Yisrael? 2 major ones? Good, the spies, Chet Meraglim, this week's Parsha, and Chet Egel, sin of the golden calf. And it's interesting because when I say traumatic, we're a fantastic people, but we know how to celebrate and we also know how to sin. And when we sin hard. We know how to do it. But there are different types of averos, right? All of us commit averos. I'm not going to take a show of hands, right? All of us commit averos. We know that in the world of sin, there are pretty much 2 different kinds of sin. There's what's called like episodic sin, where I commit an avera. We do it day in and day out, right? Whatever averos we commit, we understand. And then there are other averos that we do that change the trajectory of our lives. I would venture to say all of us know sin in both of these categories. There are the things that I do day in and day out, and then there are the mistakes, the sinful mistakes that I have made in my life that have fundamentally transformed the trajectory of my life. My life was going in one direction, I made a tremendous mistake, and now my life is going in a different direction. We all have events like that. And the reality is that sometimes in the aftermath of those, what we'll call trajectory shifting sins, sometimes you could redirect, but a lot of times you can't. A lot of times, once you change the course of your life, you can't get it back to what it was. It doesn't mean that life can't be beautiful. It doesn't mean that life can't be incredible. It doesn't mean that life can't be fulfilling and meaningful and holy, but it's going to be different. I think as we get older, we all recognize the truth of these words. You know, when you're young, listen very carefully, right? When you're young, so what happens? Often young people don't pay that much attention to their actions, right? Why not? Because first of all, again, there's that feeling of immortality, that feeling of invincibility, but really deep down, what really kind of motivates young people is a feeling of whatever mistakes I make, I can undo. I can undo it. So it's not a big deal. Some indiscretions, some poor decisions, some wrong turns. In the grand scheme of things, I'll just kind of put it back into reverse and get back onto the right path. And the truth is, you can do that with a lot of things, but as we get older, we recognize that then there are those events in life that I can't put it back into reverse. And I make mistakes, and I do things, and I make decisions, and now I've fundamentally put my life in a different direction, and I can't back out of it. Now I could shift, I could change. Tshuva is always possible, but you know, as long as you could do tshuva, it doesn't mean you could change your life. It doesn't mean you could change your realities. You could change you. You could change how you think, how you feel, how you approach things. But a lot of times in life, we make decisions, and as a result of those decisions, my life is now on a particular trajectory, and I can't change it. I can't change it. For Klal Yisrael, there are two events that fundamentally shifted and altered our trajectory in an irreversible way. The first was the sin of the golden calf. Remember, again, Chazal described the sin of the golden calf in a very dramatic way. They describe it as a couple getting married, right? HaKadosh Baruch Hu was the chassan, HaKadosh Baruch Hu was the groom, and Klal Yisrael was the kala, we were the bride. And the rabbis, they compare sin of the golden calf to the kala committing adultery under the chuppah. Now, obviously, adultery is bad all the time, right? But the notion or the concept of a spouse committing adultery under the chuppah, right when that marriage is beginning to take off, right when that marriage is being solidified, represents almost like an unforgivable trespass. You know, the power and resilience of marriage is that when two people are committed to each other, they can overcome a lot. Maybe they could even overcome anything. But when the marriage didn't even have a chance to really get off the ground, and then there is that trespass, there is that betrayal, it's much more difficult to be able to get it back on the rails. So that's how Chazal compared the sin of the golden calf. In that moment of Har Sinai, which was the beginning of the marriage between Hashem and Klal Yisrael, and then we literally committed adultery. We set our eyes on something else, in this case, the golden calf. It fundamentally ruptured the relationship almost in an irreparable way, to the point that the Gemara says that every misfortune that befalls the Jewish people is somehow related to the sin of the golden calf, which is like a tremendous, tremendous thing to contemplate. The second such event was Chet HaMeraglim, this week's parsha, the sin of the spies. So remember again, Moshe Rabbeinu sends spies. What was the point of the spies? What was the point of the spies? Right? So on a most basic level, reconnaissance. Reconnaissance, because remember, understand, when we entered into Eretz Yisrael, there was going to be a fundamental shift in our national existence. When we were in the desert, how were we supported? How were we supported in the desert? Supernatural. Supernatural. Everything was supernatural. There was man, right? Heavenly bread, heavenly food every day. There was a fire at night, a cloud by day, supernatural existence. You come into Eretz Yisrael, everything changes. Suddenly again, you have to go to war, right? You have to go to Eretz Yisrael from the beginning. It requires war, requires battle. You have to go to war. You're going to have to farm the land. You're going to have to do all of these things. So it makes sense that there would have to be some type of reconnaissance. There'd have to be some type of process to figure out what is the best way in. But of course we know that everything goes off the rails. Everything goes off the rails. And again, remember, you want to talk about a trajectory-changing event. It's not just that the aftermath of the sin of the spies is that we have to wander the desert for 40 years. But remember, again, the spies come back and deliver their report when? When? 40 days later. What's the date? The 9th of Av. The 9th of Av. The identity of the 9th of Av is concretized and crystallized as a day of Jewish catastrophe, tragedy, and mourning at the sin of the spies. It's not the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash that concretized the identity of this date as a date of mourning. It was the sin of the spies. And in fact, the lashon of the Gemara, the wording of the Gemara is, Atem bechisem bechia shel chinam. Hashem essentially says, you cried for nothing. I will give you a reason to cry now on this date. So a trajectory-altering event. We come back, HaKadosh Baruch Hu was literally willing to hand us Eretz Yisrael on a silver platter. Again, we were going to have to fight. There was going to be war, but we were assured of victory. We were assured of victory, and yet then everything changes. Everything changes. A lot of times with these stories that we see in Chumash, so we know the stories, right? We know how they start, we know how they end, we know the story in its entirety. But a lot of times because we know the stories, we often don't necessarily look at them with the same critical eye. And these stories have so much to teach us, not just about the mistakes that they represent, but have so much to teach us ultimately, again, just about life in general. There is so much to be gleaned, so much to be learned from each of these stories. So let's take a look. So today, I want to isolate 3 lessons, 3 takeaways from the sin of the spies. So in source number 1, this is just the intro. V'aydaber Shel Moshe Lemar, Shlach lecha anashim liyasu es Eretz Canaan, asher ani noseim livnei Yisrael, ish echad lematei avosav tishlachu, kol mesi bahem. Okay, so just as an aside, just something to contemplate, it's interesting because here, when you read Parsha Shlach, so it looks like that the idea for the spies came from God. Now, in fact, remember in Chumash Devarim, when Moshe Rabbeinu reviews all of Jewish history over the 40 years in the desert, it turns out that it wasn't God's idea. God did not want the spies. God did not need the spies. God knew the land was good. The spies was an accommodation. It's something actually very interesting as well. Moshe Rabbeinu understood, like every parent understood, that, if you always say no to your kids, what's going to happen? Right? Then they're going to stop listening, right? They're going to stop listening. So sometimes, actually, interestingly enough, if you say yes, they'll actually say okay, and then not even want the thing that they've been begging for. So Moshe Rabbeinu, interestingly enough, felt Moshe Rabbeinu did not want to send the spies. But if there's one thing that Moshe Rabbeinu knew, it was his flock. He knew his constituency. He knew the people. And he knew that this was not a good idea. But he also knew that if they asked for it and he said no, what was going to be the reaction? What would be the reaction? Right? What are you hiding? Why can't we see it? Why can't we see it? So Moshe Rabbeinu says, sure. With the hope that what was going to happen afterwards was, Moshe Rabbeinu said sure, so I guess there's nothing to hide, so we don't really need this. Okay, and that's why, interestingly enough, the people who were sent on this mission were righteous people, right? Again, remember, we often, in general, one of the interesting things about the Chumash is we kind of judge people, we create biographical sketches of our biblical characters based on how the story unfolds, right? When I say Esav, you think? Bad, Russia, evil, right? But remember, that's not how Esav started. Right? Like, in other words, we read a lot of things into the narrative. For example, when the pasuk says that Rivka was pregnant, the children were struggling inside of her, right? So we have this idea that what's happening? Esav has Yaakov in a headlock, right? He's beating him up in the womb. This is what happens. But again, that's not what it says. All it says is that Rivka had a very difficult pregnancy. Why? Because she was carrying 2 sons with ridiculous potential. And people, right? So big-minded people, strong people often can't occupy the same space. It doesn't mean that one is bad and one is good. It just means strong people need their ability to develop. And sharing the same womb did not work for Yaakov and Esav, just like sharing the same home. They're not working. So, but again, Esav begins like every other kid. Good, beautiful, cute, sweet, filled with potential. and then he made a series of bad life decisions. The meraglim, even the word meraglim itself carries with it for us a negative connotation. But it's important to understand these men were righteous men. They were tribal leaders. They were tzaddikim. They were chosen for this mission because Moshe felt, okay, if we need to send spies, at least this is the good group to send, because hopefully, again, they'll remain targeted, they'll remain mission focused, and ultimately, again, they won't get lost in all of the craziness. Okay, so now remember, let's fast forward to number 2. So what ends up happening? So now they come back. And what ends up happening over here is, of course, we know the story. Everything goes off the rails. So in 2, 3, and 4, I want to show you 3 parts of the Meraglim's report, which I think yields for us 3 tremendous life lessons. So look at source number 2. Vayisapru. So remember again, the Meraglim come back. They come back. This is when they're delivering their report. Vayomru, they said to Moshe, Banu al ha'aretz asher shalachtanu. Moshe, we did what you told us. We went to the land in which you sent us. V'gam zavas chalav udvashi v'zeh pirya. Ultimately, again, and they say, Moshe, by the way, you're right. It flows with milk and honey. It's beautiful. The land is abundant. And remember, again, the Meraglim brought back fruit. They wanted to show the people that this was fertile land. This was fertile land. V'zeh pirya. Efes. Ki az ha'am hayoshev ba'aretz v'amrim bitzuros gidolos ma'od v'gam yilidei ha'anak re'enosham. But then they say, Efes. However, Efes can mean however or but. But the people who inhabit the land are mighty. The cities are extremely huge and fortified, and we saw even giants over there. Ha'amalek yoshev ba'aretz hanegev v'achiti v'ayevusi v'amor yoshev b'har v'aknani yoshev alayam ayad hayardin. And then I figure this whole chevra is there, right? Amalek is over there, the Chitim are there, the Yevusi are there, the Amorites are there, the Canaanim are there. Essentially, it's a land that is surrounded by hostile neighbors. So essentially, what do the Meraglim say? What information is contained in this part of their report? What would you say?
They don't like it.
They don't like it. Good. Possibility of 1. What else? Starts off with positivity, right? It's interesting over here that the Meraglim, it's not like they come back and they say, it's terrible. They're saying, it's good. The land as a land is a good land. And then what happens after they say that? But they're afraid. The word Efes, by the way, how else would you translate Efes? 0. See, here's what's incredible. Do you know what they're saying? Efes means the land is great, but it is impossible for us to conquer this land. The land is fantastic. The land is beautiful. Efes, there is a 0 possibility, 0 probability that we could be successful against all of these hostile neighbors. Now understand what's happening over here. Now, what's fascinating about that statement? What's fascinating about that? Right? Where's their emunah? And Efes, 0% chance? 0% chance? You want to say this is going to be an uphill battle, right? You want to say this is not going to be a walk in the park, right? This is not going to be like the waves coming down the Egyptians in Yam Suf, right? This is going to be a difficult campaign. There's 0 possibility. There's 0 possibility that we can do it. So first of all, it's important also to understand who these people are. And as much as these are tribal leaders, remember again, there are people who just a little bit more than a year beforehand left Egypt. They're a slave nation. And as we always say, you can take the people out of Egypt, you can't necessarily take Egypt out of the people. And this is incredibly important. 210 years of slavery leaves an impact on the persona of a nation. And just because you've been free for a year, and just because you've seen some incredible successes, including some military ones during that time, doesn't mean that you're actually ready to embrace a destiny. But what I want to highlight over here is something absolutely amazing. And this to me is one of the most important life lessons. When you tell yourself that something is impossible, what is the probability of success?
0.
Efes. And herein lies lesson number 1. The moment that the Meraglim gave, and again, I just want to point out, if you notice in their words, there's nothing bad about what they're saying, right? They're not maligning the land. They're not maligning God. There's nothing over, and there's nothing over here that's lashon hara. There's nothing bad. The tragedy of this statement is when you tell yourself that something is impossible, the probability of success is absolutely zero. Is absolutely zero. And this is it. So once we read these psukim, it's done. It's done. Had they come back and said, Chaburah, this is going to be really difficult. Had they said, we're really scared, we're really nervous, we don't know if we could do this, we're unsure of ourselves, okay, there's what to work with. But once you tell yourself that something is impossible, then at the end of the day, the probability of success remains at one big FS, one big zero. And what a tremendous lesson for ourselves in our lives. I remember when I first started out in the Rabbanos many years ago, not here in Baltimore, New Jersey. I had a father who came over to my house with his daughter, and his daughter was having difficulty getting into school. So he came to talk to me about it. He's there with his daughter, and he said, he said, I know exactly what the problem is. He says, my daughter is really bad at math. And she's always been bad at math. And she will always be bad at math. It's just not her skill set. She's just a wonderful girl, right? And I'm wondering to myself that, like, okay, everybody has stuff that they struggle with, right? I was able to relate to this very much because my father is a physicist and I am terrible at math and science. I don't know, it skipped me. Well, for sure my children are better, right? So everybody has their weaknesses. No one's perfect at anything. But I think to myself, Ribono Shel Olam, like, did this wonderful, precious young woman grow up always hearing that she can't do something? So if that's what she was hearing her entire life, then there's zero probability of success. Because if you're growing up whispering, hearing someone whisper in your ear, you can't do it, you can't do it, you can't do it, you can't do it, you won't do it. And the truth is, so some of us do have people like that who whisper in our ears things that we can't do. But I think more often than not, many of us are just our own whisperers. It's not anyone else whispering a message in our ear, but it's often me just whispering to myself about the things I can do and the things I can't do. And how many of us have created for ourselves glass ceilings. I've decided this is something I can't do. Who decided that? Well, I decided that. Okay, and this becomes this cyclical, self-fulfilling prophecy. If you take an FS approach to life, if in any particular life endeavor, and by the way, you could plug this into anything. You plug this into relationships, you plug this into career, you plug this into your ruchnis, into your Yiddishkeit. If I tell myself that something is absolutely impossible, then you could bank on one thing. The probability of success is an absolute zero. That's lesson one. And again, even before we go on, that's why once you see these psukim, and here's the tragedy of it. The tragedy of it is when you don't believe in yourself, everything becomes an overwhelming task, and everything becomes an upward climb, and everything becomes impossible. And that's the tragedy of this story. Well-meaning men, righteous men, who just simply did not believe that they could succeed, therefore become the own, almost like fulfillment of their own negative prophecy. If it's FS, then it becomes an FS probability of success. Take a look at number 3, another idea. And this is really profound. And again, a lot of these concepts are really intertwined. Take a look at 3. So now, again, after what ends up happening is, the report gets progressively worse, right? The tone changes. Now, by the way, it's interesting. Well, let's read it. So then they began to malign the land, right? What happens? Asher Torah osa al bnei Yisrael lemor haaretz asher avarnu bal asor osa eretz ocheles yoshvel. Now they begin to malign the land, right? Not only are there a lot of enemies, but the land itself consumes its inhabitants. Whatever that means, it's a diseased land, it's not a good land, right? Anshe Midos. And the people we saw in there, very tall people, giants, overwhelming. So but I just want to point out, there's an interesting progression, right? How is it that in source number 2, all they're doing is they're giving a report about the land, right? They're not saying anything bad about the land. They're just saying there's zero probability of success for us to enter. How does that lead ultimately to number 3, to maligning the land? What would you say? So remember, the greatest psychology book in the world is the Torah, right? So here's what happens. The moment you tell yourself something is impossible, what do you have to do next? You have to, right? You have to convince yourself that it's really impossible. See, if I'm going to tell myself that I can't do something, then I have to create the narrative around that it's really impossible. Because if it's not really impossible, then I have to try harder. But I don't want to try harder because I'm too scared or for whatever the reason. So then you have to create almost like this reality that supports your FS contention. So that's why you begin to see this buildup. So now it goes from, it's a great land. It flows with milk and honey. It's plentiful. Look at the fruit. Yeah, there's a lot of hostile neighbors and therefore we can't go in. And in order to bolster that claim that we can't go in, what's next? You know what? Thought about it a little bit more. It's bad. It's bad. Now, what does that do if it's bad? What does that do? What that does is like hedging your bets. That even if we could do it, then what? We shouldn't do it. Isn't it incredible? You know, sometimes everything we need to know, not just about our history, but about ourselves, we could see in Torah. Torah is the greatest psychology book in the world because you could see everything about the dynamic of the human condition in here. So that's the progression. Now look at the last pasuk in source number 3. Furthermore, again, then goes on, when we were there, so this is all the spies speaking. So there we saw, again, the big giants, and ultimately, again, in our eyes, we seemed like grasshoppers, and so we were in their eyes. So again, obviously they're trying to paint a picture over here, that they were so tall, so big, we were like grasshoppers in our eyes, and we were like grasshoppers in their eyes. What's the problem with the pasuk?
You don't know what you're thinking.
Beautiful. You can make a statement about how you feel about yourself. What you cannot know is how other people feel about you. But then something amazing happens. When you feel poorly enough about yourself, you begin to project that compromised self-image onto others, or onto the way others feel about you as well. It's incredible to see that at the end of the day, to say that they felt like grasshoppers in their eyes, okay, you're entitled to say that. You feel small, they look big, but there's no way you can know how they looked at you. Did you talk to them? Did you engage them? Was there a conversation? But again, when you feel so poorly about yourself, you reflect that negative or that lack of self-esteem, that lack of self-image onto others. And we see this all the time in life, right? In other words, think about this just a second. When I'm feeling good about myself in life, right? When I'm feeling good about myself in life, at the end of the day, what don't I care about? I know that's an open-ended question, right? When I feel good about myself, what does not matter to me? What other people think, right? It's fascinating, right? It doesn't matter. I don't care. I'm good. I'm in a good place in life. I'm doing what I need to be doing. I'm happy. I feel fulfilled. Other people like it, don't like it, agree, disagree. It doesn't even matter. But when I'm struggling with my sense of self, when I'm unhappy with me, then suddenly it's fascinating. Like I feel all the walls closing in. Everyone's looking at me. Everyone's judging me. Everyone's not nice. Everyone's this. Meanwhile, everyone's just doing their own thing, right? No one's actually paying any attention to me. But it's incredible to see how the way I feel about myself is reflected in how I see the world and the people around me. Incredible. And you begin to see this dramatic progression. So again, what begins in number one, just look at the flow. So what begins in number one as righteous men going out on a holy mission, then goes to number 2 of righteous men still coming back and saying the land is great, but convincing themselves that they cannot do this. FS, zero probability of success. Okay, once there's 0 probability of success, then there really is 0 probability of success, which then leads to number 3. Well, if I can't be successful, I have to convince myself that the entire initiative is not even good. It's not even worth it. It's not even worth it, right? So therefore, again, they begin to malign the land, which then leads ultimately again. But deep down, what do the Meraglim know? Deep down, what do they really know?
They know they can do it.
They know they can do it. See, because at the end of the day, you can't really escape that little voice inside of your head that tells you, stop it. Stop it. You're creating your own glass ceilings. You're creating your own limitations. So deep down inside, they know that they can do it, but you have to kind of squash that voice. You have to silence that voice. How do you silence that voice? By ultimately, again, projecting this negativity onto everything around you. So we're grasshoppers. Everyone thinks we're grasshoppers. And suddenly, again, you begin to construct this entire narrative of, I can't do it. It's simply impossible. The world hates me. Everyone hates me. And therefore, again, this entire thing remains impossible. FS proposition. But also to point out over here, this is incredibly important, that sometimes like when we feel overwhelmed about the negativity around us, it's important to do a little bit of a self-check. Is the negativity really coming from external sources? Or am I projecting or reflecting my inner negativity on everything that's happening around me? It's kind of like, there are some people, not any of us, but we all know someone, right? Some people, and they fight with everyone. They fight with everyone, right? And like they're just always getting into arguments. And so, but yet if you ask those people, like, what do you think is at the root of all of this interpersonal tension? What will they tell you? They'll go through the list. This one does this, and this one does that, and this one does that. And meanwhile, what message has to be conveyed to this person? All of us have someone we don't get along with. If you don't get along with anyone, chances are it's you. Chances are it's you. Now you have to know how to deliver that message, but chances are it's you. It can't be that the world is broken and you're the only one that's whole. Now again, maybe it's a little bit of everyone, but chances are you have some role in this entire process as well. Because again, if everything looks dark around you, how much of that is your personal darkness that's being reflected onto the greater world? You might feel like a grasshopper, but you can't know what other people feel about you. And if somehow you think that other people think about you, that might not be other people, that might just be something that's churning in a state of disrepair in you. Good, that's point number 3. Now I come to source number 4. And this really is like the culmination of everything, right? So up until now, it's been all the negative stuff. Now what's happened, number 4? Now remember, there are 12 spies. Out of the 12 spies, 10 went off the rails, 2 did not. Who are the 2 who did not? Yoshua and Kalev. Now, interestingly enough, in this whole exchange, Yoshua is kind of silent. Now, the reason Yoshua is silent is because no one was really going to listen to him, because they viewed him, and correctly so, as a mouthpiece of Moshe Rabbeinu. So, of course, he was going to rise to the defense of Moshe Rabbeinu. So, interesting enough, so who? Now, watch what happens. Number 4, Vayahas Kalev es ha'am el Moshe. So, Kalev silences everyone, right? So remember again, Kalev was a person of standing, and again, he didn't have any particular ties to, general leadership to Moshe Rabbeinu. So Kalev, he's like, I want to tell you something, I want to say something. So everybody listens. Vayomer, so Kalev says, Alo na'aleh, let's go up, v'yarashna osa, we will inherit the land, ki achol nuchal la, because we can. So Kalev gives this beautiful rah-rah speech. We can do it. What's the problem? What's the problem with Kalev's statement? Now, by the way, the response to Kalev's statement,
Yes, we can do it.
The response is they drown him out. Right? Remember again, they ignore him. Because at the end of the day, the opinion of the 10 outweighed the opinion of the 2. So they ignored him. But what's the problem with Kalev's statement, right? We understand what Kalev's trying to do. So if you're Kalev, what should you be doing?
No mention of Hashem at all.
So interestingly enough, there's no mention of God, which is interesting, good. What else is interesting about this?
Not telling them how.
He's not telling them how, right? In other words, remember, to the Meraglim's credit, to their credit, they're not coming along and saying it's a bad idea just because we feel it's a bad idea. They're giving concrete information, right? Remember again, what are they saying? There's a lot of strong nations over here. There's a lot of hostile neighbors. The land consumes its inhabitants. They're advancing concrete issues. So if you're Kalev, and you want to sway public opinion, what should you do? I don't know, put forward a strategy. Say, you know what, we'll come up through the east, or whatever, we'll attack them by sea, or we'll do this, I don't know. Provide a plan, or if you don't have a plan, say, you know what, Chaburah, let's table this discussion for 24 hours, right? Let's huddle up, and let's see if we could come back with a plan. And if the plan is good, then everybody's in. If the plan's not good, we'll abandon this and we'll just stay in the desert. But Kalev gives this beautiful speech of, Alona aleh, let's go, right? We can do this, we can inherit it. We can do it. And it's beautiful, right? Everybody likes rah-rah speeches. Do you know there's a term sometimes when the rah-rah speech is ill-timed? There's a term called toxic positivity, right? Toxic positivity, I'll give you an example. You ever going through a difficult time in life, whether it's loss or something else, and a well-meaning person comes along and tells you, it's gonna be okay, right? In general, what do you feel when a person tells you it's gonna be okay, right? It's gonna be much better when I punch you in the face, right? Like, in other words, I know it's gonna be okay. I know that I'm gonna live and I'm gonna make it through, but I don't want to hear that right now. And it's actually very important because a lot of times when we try to be good friends and sources of comfort for people, and we just kind of cocoon them with the message of it's gonna be okay, you're strong, you're gonna make it through. While all of that might be true, the concept of toxic positivity means sometimes you actually need to affirm the suffering. Sometimes what you need to do is you need to validate the struggle. You need to tell a person, you know what, I don't have anything to say to you right now. Like, I just want you to know, I'm here. I'm not going to, you see this all the time. The Chazal, in their incredible wisdom, understood. The halacha is when you go to be menachem aval, you go to visit a mourner, what are you supposed to say? Nothing. Right, nothing. Right, why? Because Chazal understood chances are if you say something, it's probably not going to be the right thing. Right? As someone who has to go to a lot of Shiva homes, unfortunately, it's interesting and well-meaning people. Oh, how old was your mother? Oh, she was 92. Oh, it's such a long life. Right? Almost as if, once she passed 92, it doesn't really matter if she's alive or not. It's fine. 92 is 92. In other words, the loss of a parent is still a profound loss. It doesn't matter how old the parent was. Baruch Hashem, of course, is there a partial nechama, partial consolation in knowing that my parent lived a long life? Of course there is. They say about Rav Avram Yitzchak Cohen Cook that his mother passed away. She was well into her 90s. And Rav Cook was crying at the Shiva. And his Talmidim couldn't understand. His students couldn't understand. They said, Rebbe, your mother was an older woman, and the truth is no one lives forever. What is this? And Rav Kook says something so beautiful. Rav Avram Yitzchak Cohen Cook, the first chief rabbi, not of the state of this was British Mandate Palestine. The first chief rabbi says, a child never stops needing his mother. Rav Avram Yitzchak Cohen Cook. So the idea Chazal understood, don't say anything, just be there. Because sometimes the best thing you could do for someone in need is nothing you're going to say. You're not going to come with some pearl of wisdom that's going to take away all of the pain. Just be there by their side, be a good friend, be present, and that's all that it is. So ultimately, again, it's interesting. So Kalev comes along. The Meraglim are advancing some significant issues to this plan. And Kalev comes along with what appears at first glance like his toxic positivity. We can do this. No, we can't. No, we just said we can't. We just said FS a few psukim ago. So what is this? I want to show you something amazing. Take a look. If you turn the page, this is a very profound piece. This is from one of my favorite svarim called the Eish Kodesh. The Eish Kodesh was written by the Piazetzna. The Rebbe of Piazetzna, of Klonomis Kalman Shapira Shemikom Damo, was a Hasidic Rebbe. Piazetzna is a town in Poland, not too far from Warsaw. The Piazetzna is a fascinating person. He was a child prodigy. He lost his father while he was still very young. His mother also as a young child. He lost his father as a young child. His mother died actually right before the war. Piazetzna had a ridiculously turbulent life. He had 2 children, a son and a daughter. His son was married with a young child. His son, his daughter-in-law, and his granddaughter were all killed in the German bombardment, the aerial bombardment of Poland, of Warsaw. And his daughter Rachel was sent with him to the ghetto and was subsequently put on the cattle car to Treblinka. So to Dachau, excuse me. She was murdered in Dachau. The Piazetzna never knew what happened to her. The Piazetzna himself was murdered by the Nazis, Machsham V'Zikram. But the Piazetzna, even though when he was in the ghetto, he lost everything. Right? He lost everything. He lost his wife, he lost his son, he lost his daughter, lost his granddaughter, he lost everything. But the Piazetzna himself created an entire network of clandestine shuls, batei medrash, soup kitchens, and orphanages. He created an entire chesed network in the Warsaw ghetto. An overwhelming, and what he did was every Shabbos in shul, when they was able to, he gave a drasha. After Shabbos, they recorded the drasha. A little bit of a historical debate as to who wrote down the drashas. Was it the Piazetzna? Was it his gabbai? And they hid the drashas in a milk canister, like an iron milk canister. The Piazetzna was murdered. After the war, there was one of the Polish peasants who was sifting through the rubble of the ghetto. They found this canister with Hebrew writing on it. They sent it to the local joint distribution committee over there, and they discovered that it was the writing of the Piazetznas. After the war, they compiled all of these drashas into a sefer called Eish Kodesh, Holy Fire. And you can see the drashas, and the drashas are dated. They're dated. So this drasha, Parsha Shlach, this was summer of 1940. And the incredible part about the Rebbe's drashas is there are essentially 3 years of drashas in it. The drashas take different tones every year. In the beginning, they're incredibly optimistic. We're going to make it through this. We're going to survive. As time goes on, the Rebbe speaks a lot about bravery in dying al Kiddush Hashem, a recognition that they may not be able to outrun this fate, but embracing this fate, leaning into this fate, with faith and with dignity, with our heads held high. So the Piazetzna over here says something amazing. Take a look at number 5. And you also have to appreciate his words are incredible, but when you understand even more who he was speaking to, it takes on a different level. So look what he writes. So the Piazetzna says, I don't understand Kalev's response. He says, Ha-ha-meraglim dvarim shaltam v'sechel amru. Ultimately, again, the meraglim, again, to their credit, they were advancing specific issues. Efes ki az ha'am varibitzuros. They were saying the indigenous nations are very strong. The cities are fortified. V'lama lo hisvakach Kalev imohem lister es sichlam v'divrei tameim rakstam alo na'aleh. So says the Piazetzna, Kalev, if you want the people to listen to you, put forward a real argument, right? Put forward a strategy. Put forward a military idea. I know the cities are fortified. We could come in this way. I know the nations are strong, but we could do this. This is not the time for a rah-rah speech. What are you saying? We can do it. No, we can't. In other words, think about this. The Meraglim are giving data. Strong nations, fortified city, surrounded by hostile enemies. And Kalev's coming along with, yes, we can do it. Says the Piazetzna, Kalev, what are you doing? And the Rebbe says something amazing. He says, Aval kach tzricha liyos emunas ishe Yisraeli. Kalev was trying to teach him about the power of emunah, the power of faith. Lo bilvad b'shah shara mavo v'derech liyeshu aso. Gam al pi sichlo v'derech hateva yamin b'Hashem sheshir v'yischazek. It's not only, in other words, obviously, it's easy to have emunah in Hashem when that emunah can be rooted in a intellectual response. Like, in other words, so if there's a strategy, and I know what to do, I know how I'm going to do it, then of course, strategy coupled with emunah is very powerful. But he says, Rak gam b'shah, she'ena roa chas v'shalom shum mavo al pisechel v'derech hatevel yeshuaso. But sometimes what emunah demands of us is even in moments, even in time, where there is no clear strategy, where there is no clear plan, where there is no clear approach, Ya'amin b'Hashem she'yoshi'uhu v'yischazek b'emunasa u'bitchuno. You have to believe in the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has our back and is going to help us be successful. V'adrabba, b'shaza, b'shazu, tov shelo yisakesh limsa eza seichel l'mavah derech hatav. Let's make the rest of this outside. Piaget says something amazing. Piaget says that what Kalev was telling them was a twofold lesson. Number one, Chaburah, you forget who our leader is. Our leader is not Moshe Rabbeinu. Our leader is the Ribono Shel Olam. And if he's telling us that this is possible and this is our destiny, then there is absolutely nothing to doubt. Okay, we could be worried, we could be nervous, but there is nothing to doubt because he is the one leading the charge. Kalev is trying to teach the people about the concept of emunah. It's easy to have emunah when you have a clear path. It's easy to have emunah when you have a clear plan. It's easy to have emunah when in the world of ishtadlus, in the world of human effort, you can say, okay, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. But what real emunah is when you don't have a plan, still believing that you could be absolutely, unequivocally successful. See, do you know why Kalev says? Do you know why Kalev does not advance a strategy? Do you know why? Do you know why? Why not? He didn't have one. He didn't have one. Because I don't know what we're supposed to do. I don't know how to penetrate these fortified cities. I have no idea what to do. I have no idea how to deal with all these hostile neighbors. I have no idea. But here's what I do know. We can do it. Now, to the world, this statement sounds profoundly illogical and unsensical. But for us, it makes perfect sense because this is the story of our people. What Kalev was teaching us is something absolutely beautiful. Sometimes in life, you just have to believe that you could be successful. And you'll fill in all of the details later. Sometimes you just don't have the plan on the front end. But don't let the lack of plan preclude you from moving yourself forward. Right? Isn't this the great tension in life? On one hand, we like to be planners. Right? We like, right? And again, and it's good to be a planner. On the other hand, there are some people who will only embark upon initiatives in life if they have the fully baked plan. They need the plan. And I need to know how it's going to work, when it's going to work. Generally, people who have to be fully planned out, how much do they accomplish in life? Something. But most of life cannot be scripted. And most of life cannot be planned. And even planners know that no matter how great the plan is, it's going to change 57 times before you reach the finish line. And that's what's happening over here. The meraglim are hung up on the plan. Right? And it's interesting. That's why if you notice in number 2, if somebody would have come back with a strategy, they would have said, possibly would have said, okay. But Kalev comes on, Kalev says, Chaburah, there's no strategy right now. But just because there's not a strategy, we still have to believe ultimately again in our ability to be successful. We have to believe in our ability to ultimately actualize our goals, even if we have absolutely no idea how we're going to get from point A to point B. And by the way, this mindset, this Kalev mindset, you know who else really represented this mindset in a dramatic way? David HaMelech. Almost, maybe next week we'll do Sefer Tehillim. So much of Sefer Tehillim is this same idea of David HaMelech saying, David HaMelech's most incredible line, Va'ani b'chastecha batachti yagel libi b'shuasecha. Hashem, I trust in your chesed, yagel libi b'shuasecha. I will rejoice, future tense, in your salvation. David HaMelech says, I have absolutely no idea how I'm going to be successful in life, but I'm already rejoicing now because I know I will be successful. How will I be successful? I have no idea, but I'm absolutely positive that I will be successful. Imagine walking through life with that mindset, that whenever you encounter a challenge, there's only one approach to challenge. I know I will be successful. That's it. I know how, what, when, where. Those are the variables of life. But the one thing that is not in question is my success. What this success will look like, how it will materialize, when it's going to materialize. Okay, those are all variables. But I know with absolute certitude that I will be successful in this challenge in life. I will get through it. Again, what getting through it means, who I will be on the other side of it, what my life will look like, no idea. But I know that I will be successful. That's Kalev. So the Piagestan says, Kalev turns to Klal Yisrael and he says, Chaburah, I don't have any strategy to give you, but here's what I can tell you, is we're going to be successful. We can do this. We can do this. We can do this because we have HaKadosh Baruch Hu and we have ourselves. And if we put our belief in Hashem, just unqualified emunah in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we believe in ourselves, then there is no telling what we have the ability to accomplish. And what a profound mindset for a fledgling nation. What a profound mindset for us. Because so many of us, right, we start things in life, and then what happens? Anytime you start like a new initiative, a new idea, a new approach, a new project, it has that new life initiative smell, it's all exciting. And then what happens? You encounter turbulence and challenges and roadblocks. And 9 out of 10 times what ends up happening? We give up. Especially if it becomes very difficult and overwhelming, I don't see any way through. Sometimes in life, you just have to say, I'll do this, I'll get this done. I'm gonna get this done. How, what, when, where, I don't know. But I know that I will get it done. It's interesting that whenever you want to do something in life, there are 3 words that if you say them, you are almost virtually guaranteed that you will fail. Right? What are the 3 words?
I can't do it.
Right? I will try.
Oh.
A Jew doesn't try. A Jew does. A Jew does. If you say I'll try by definition means, right? Try by definition means that you're already incorporating a possibility of failure. So if you're already hedging your bets, right? And you're gonna try, chances are you're gonna fail. Kalev says there's only one way to be successful in life. And that's ultimately, again, to be absolutely unequivocally confident of your success. Now, again, I don't know what success will look like at the end. I don't know how success is going to materialize. But I absolutely believe unequivocally that I will be successful. But there's no strategy. Most of life doesn't have a strategy. But there's no plan. Most times in life, I don't really have a concrete plan. And even if I do, it's going to change a million different times. But I have to be able to believe in my ability to succeed, even in the absence of a clear strategy and even in the absence of a clear plan. That's what Kalev was trying to tell them. Now, the tragedy of this story is that what did they do to Kalev? They dismissed him. They didn't listen. And because they didn't listen, ultimately, again, our people were consigned to another 40 years in the desert. That entire generation died out. They did not enter into Eretz Yisrael because they weren't capable of doing it. Because people who cannot adopt a can-do attitude, a nation that cannot believe in its own success even without a strategy and a plan, is not a nation that could conquer, and is not a nation that could be a nation of destiny. And by the way, I just want to point out how beautiful this is. I'm sure that there was like a video that was going around. It was so moving. On Motzei Shabbos, when there was one of the barrages from Iran, so there were a whole number of motorists that got stuck in a tunnel in Eretz Yisrael. I'm sure many of you saw this video. And it was absolutely beautiful. Somebody turned up their stereo in their car. They were singing the song Hashem Yitbarach Tamid Ohivoti, and everybody just started getting out and dancing. And I think to yourself, I always imagine people look at this, they're like, you must think Jews are crazy. Jews are crazy. There's literally, again, a barrage of ballistic missiles coming from Iran, and we're dancing in a tunnel, right? And you listen to the word, right? And I say, Odio Tertov, Odio Tertov. Oh, it's going to constantly just be good and good. And really, you're stuck in a tunnel. You're stuck in a tunnel. There are missiles coming down all around you, and it's Odio Tertov, Odio Tertov. Yeah, because you know what? We learned our lesson. Once upon a time, we ignored Kalev, and we realized the disastrous results of not believing in ourselves and not believing in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and not believing that we could do anything as individuals and as a people. And I feel like what we've seen more than anything, especially now in these last 620 plus days, is that when we believe in ourselves and when we believe in our ability to be successful, even without a concrete plan or strategy, that success will materialize. The path to that success, the difficulties of that path, the roadblocks of that path, what success looks like, those are all kind of determined along the journey. But ultimately, again, we ignored Kalev's advice once upon a time, and I think as a people, we learned our lesson from that. So if you bring this all together, it turns out that from this episode of the Meraglim, we learn so many beautiful and incredible dramatic life lessons. Number one, never tell yourself something is impossible. Because if you tell yourself it's impossible, then it will constantly remain impossible. And the probability of success is an absolute zero. Number two, when you feel badly about yourself, you often project that negative and compromised self-image onto the people around you as well. And you assume that if you don't like you, then other people must not like you as well. Negative self-perception ultimately leads to the fundamental erosion of our other life relationships. And lesson number three, the lesson of Kal, lesson of Piagetna, right? The Rebbe, the Piagetna teaches us, is that sometimes in life, the most important thing is just believe you can be successful. But what's the plan? I don't know it yet. What's the strategy? No idea. How are you gonna get from point A to point B? I don't know, but all I know is that I can do it. And by the way, when you think about it, who was the Piagetna talking to? He was talking to a group of people who were huddled in some bunker in the Warsaw Ghetto. There was not one person in that minyan who had not suffered tragic loss. There were no children already by then in the Warsaw Ghetto. Children were eradicated. Children were so he's talking about who is he talking to? And the Piagetna is saying, we'll get through this. We can do this. We got this. We got this. The Piagetna don't know what that meant. Did he know what the road ahead was going to be? Absolutely not. But that is the confidence of the Jew. The confidence we need to have as individuals and as a nation. And what an incredible lesson for us to take, first of all, in this period of our national lives, that even when things look overwhelming, and even when things look difficult, and even when we wonder to ourselves, how is this ever going to end? How are we going to be successful? Just again, it should be a bumper sticker. Alo na'aleh v'arashnu osa ki achol nuchal la. We got this. We got this. Ki achol nuchal la. We got this. And it's not just as an as individuals. We all face our challenges. And in the face of those challenges, it is so tempting to say, I can't do it. It's so tempting to say FS. It's so tempting to say I give up. And once again, we always have to hear that voice of Kalev in our ear and in our heart and in our soul. I will be successful. And I don't doubt I will be successful. How, what, where, when? I don't know any of that yet. No, I don't have any strategy. I don't have any plan, because sometimes in life there are circumstances that are so overwhelming that I don't have a strategy. But I'm absolutely, unequivocally positive that I will be successful. We didn't listen to Kali the first time around, but Amirat Hashem, we should be zocheh to continue to listen to his words, to live his words, both as a people and as individuals, and Amirat Hashem be zocheh to recognize our personal and our national successes together, Amirat Hashem, in the days, in the weeks, in the months, and in the years ahead. Everyone. All right, so shir next week, Amirat Hashem, same time. If you're not on the WhatsApp chat, there's a QR code over here. We're very technical. This is 2025, right? So you can scan the QR code and you will be added to the WhatsApp chat. That way, again, if there are any changes in schedule or any last minute cancellations or changes of location, you'll be able to know that as well. Have a great day, everyone.